topic is on mobilizing time entry with presenter Marty Moran from AboutTime Technologies. Just a few housekeeping items before we get started. Everyone is in listen-only mode, so if you have questions, please type them into the questions box on your screen, and we will address them at the end of the session. If you need to step away, please do not put your phone on hold. It will have hold music and play for all the attendees. If this webinar will be recorded, and we will email out a copy to everyone within a few days. I will now turn it over to you, Marty.
Krista, thank you very much, and good morning, folks. Sorry for muting you. I like to have the noise typically, but with a large group, it can make it a little bit difficult. Krista, just a real quick question. Can you see my screen?
No, because I have to make you the presenter. Sorry about that.
Very good. That's okay.
There we go.
Wonderful.
Now you should be able to share. There we go. Now I can see your screen.
Thank you very much. Great. So, folks, my name, as Krista mentioned, is Marty Moran. I'm with a company called AboutTime. We're a technology company, as you might have guessed. We have endeavored to build a time and attendance collection system using mobile technologies. And since our inception, we have integrated that with construction accounting systems. So we work very specifically with the construction industry. Having said that, I want to occupy the next 4 or 5 hours of your day presenting this application. No, in fact, we should be completed within about 30 minutes, and there will be time for questions at the end. So we started life as AboutTime approximately 10 years ago, back in 2003, 2004. And really, we are the, I'll say the brainchild of contractors, 2 contractors in the Salt Lake City area that were community members and neighbors, really found that they were confronting the same issue almost simultaneously in their growing construction business. And that was that time collection for processing payroll for job and field personnel was very time-consuming. It was always fraught with tardiness, folks late in getting their timesheets in. Oftentimes the data was missing, and then, of course, they were working very hard to get that data inputted into their systems so that they could process payroll and get reports out and so forth. And what they did at the time was to look at the computer industry, the technology industry, to really determine if there was anything out there that was available that would address their issues, and found the marketplace lacking and decided to start the company AboutTime. So we are founded by construction people. Most of us, in fact, in our past were construction people. We're very, very consistent in our approach to the marketplace, and there are a couple of things that we started off with as concepts that we continue to adhere to, we think are very important to our success. The first is keeping the application very simple. One of the things that we found in working with the construction industry is we don't want to turn your field personnel into computer people. We don't want them staring at their phones all day long, trying to figure out how to clock in or how to clock to a cost code. So we keep the application very, very simple in terms of the menuing, the screens, and so forth. And in a short while, I'm going to depart from the PowerPoint, and we're going to open the actual application on our iPad, and you'll see exactly how it works. But in addition to that, we've built our system to be very powerful in the office. One of the things we mentioned is we did not set out to build an accounting system, nor did we set out to build a payroll system. However, we constructed our software and designed it to share data with solutions like the Sage products, Sage 100 and Sage 300. And what that means is we can gather timesheet data, and you'll see in addition to timesheet data quite a bit more to that, and hand that information off to a payroll system like Timberline's for payroll processing, eliminating the entry of data. So our system is, and what I would describe as kind of our catchphrase, simple in the field and powerful in the office, eliminating the re-entry of data. The problem or problems we set out to resolve were the paper timesheet, the fiction that is the recreated week at the end of the week by an individual filling in a piece of paper. And there are a couple of things we note about it. I think we all understand that oftentimes it's difficult to remember what I had for lunch yesterday, let alone what time I started, what time the day concluded, and what I worked on. Our system is a real-time system. We collect the data every day. and we have the ability to collect it based upon an electronic, call it an electronic signature from the device. So we know exactly when people show up on the job and what time they leave the job. And our clients tell us that this saves them a great deal of time and money, eliminating the rounding errors around time. In addition to that, the American Payroll Association tells us that when employees of any type of company are required to record their work time via pencil or pen and paper, they have a tendency to over-report that time by an average of 41 minutes a day. What we all understand is that 41 minutes in a construction day is a lot of time and a lot of money. The other component is eliminating the entry of the data at the end of the payroll week for purposes of processing payroll and reporting. Because we create this information automatically, the information is reviewed and approved by the people that were responsible for entering the data before. So it's much less manual work in getting the data into the system and a great deal more time to review and approve and ensure that the data is correct before it becomes payroll information. A couple of notes about the solution that we like to point out, and there really are four that I think are critical in understanding the value. First of all, we're eliminating a lot of manual data entry. And again, as evidenced by the things that we talked about earlier. In character truth about our solution, the workflows, and you'll see this as we open the application, the workflows are definable. So you have the ability to show on the phone or show on the iPad just the information that an employee should see. So I'm going to clock in as different people, and you're going to see that the role that I'm defined under will determine what I see on my screen. And we also include or have activated business intelligence. We have the ability to deliver timesheet data and job data very automatically based upon thresholds and triggers that you set in the system so that people are receiving information on their iPad or on their smartphone. It looks something like this. There is the mobile device component, which is the phone or the tablet computer, and that feeds information to what we call the control center. The control center is an application that is part of our solution that handles the synchronization of information from the devices to your office, and then also the synchronization of that information from into your accounting solution. So we gather information in real time, and we do so wirelessly. We manage labor budgets and productivity budgets, so we have the ability to hand that data to the device as well. In addition, as time has evolved, when we first wrote our solution, we authored it for Palm Pilot way back in 2004. Those were considered to be cutting-edge technology. Today, our solution runs on smartphones and tablet computers. We don't choose favorites, so we run on Androids, we run on iPhones, we run on BlackBerries, and so forth. But we're able to take advantage of the advances in technology. So today, those phones also, of course, have cameras. They have video devices. They're geolocation enabled. So we have the ability to utilize all of that technology in our application today. We've added the ability to capture field information. And then, of course, we integrate with your accounting systems. So we run on familiar mobile devices. We, as I mentioned, run on the Apple line of computers and devices, as well as Android, as well as BlackBerry. One of the cautions we tend to offer up today, BlackBerry is fading from the marketplace. I wouldn't run out and buy a lot of those. But we also like to point out that we can run on a disconnected job site. One of the questions we get from many of our first-time customers is, what about that job site that does not have a cellular connection or an internet connection? And we have the ability to run the application there, collect the information, and then hand off that data to the control center at the end of the day or later in the day when we find that connection. You're going to see that we use big buttons to keep it simple, and we also have a component of our solution that's browser-based, which allows those people that are perhaps not on a job site to enter their time against job cost codes and so forth and get that information approved through the process. And very quickly, I do like to illustrate just what the solution looks like from a technical standpoint. When people think of our solution, they tend to think of the device, the phone or the tablet computer, and that's That's the very obvious component of the solution. However, as I mentioned before, there is a component, a software component that we call the control center. The control center sits in your office on your behind your firewall, and it gathers data from your Sage system, employee data, job data, equipment data, job budget data, and so forth. And it's through the control center that you're able to direct the information to the appropriate devices. So if I happen to be a job employee for you, and I'm perhaps only responsible for punching myself in and out, I don't have the responsibility for clocking in a crew or for selecting cost codes. All I'm going to see on my device will be my information. I won't have access to other employee data and so forth. However, if I'm a foreman and I have a crew assigned to me, when I open my device, I'll be able to see the employees that are assigned to me, the project or projects that are assigned to me, and the cost codes for which I should be entering time. So the control center allows you to direct information in the appropriate way. It also allows you to identify how often data handoffs should take place throughout the course of the day, from the device to the office, and perhaps either throughout the day or at the end of the day from the control center to your Sage implementation. So you really can set that workflow or those workflows. And the application looks like this. You're going to see this momentarily, but I'd like to illustrate a couple of points here as well. We can clock in, and you're going to see me do this using PIN code. So the simplest way to clock into our solution is a 4, 5, 6, 7-digit PIN code. That's definable by you as a company. And that allows the employee to either clock themselves in, or if, again, they're a supervisor, to clock in their crew. We do also employ higher levels of security for those companies that need it. We use biometric readers or RFID readers to positively identify employees that are clocking in. Some of our clients need to resolve the issue of their employees having what we call buddy punching, individuals clocking each other in if somebody's running late. A biometric reader used to be called a fingerprint reader. They're much more accurate today. They're much more affordable, and they're certainly more usable in terms of everyday use. Of course, real construction people that do real work tend to work with their hands, dirty them up, and beat them up a little bit. The tools today actually read below the fingerprint level and don't store the actual fingerprints. So they're very, very acceptable in terms of union environments and so forth, as well as being very usable for, as I mentioned, people who do real work. Now, this is what a clock-in looks like for a foreman or supervisor. So the difference is they're managing their crew. They're clocking in each of their crew members, and will be prompted for things like cost codes. Now, one of the things you're going to see today through the course of our presentation is sample information. You may or may not see examples that fit your particular business. However, we can, because we're reading this data in directly from Sage, we can replicate data exactly as you see it for your cost codes, for your job information, and so forth. And for those of you that are interested, we can follow up with much more specific information to your environment. The last component that I'd like to illustrate from here is that because the devices today are GPS enabled, we know where the individual is when they clock in or when they clock out or when they clock to a cost code. So for example, if they're clocking in from other than the job site, because we have a geofence placed around the job site, their supervisor is going to know that. They're not going to know that you know that they're clocking in from other than the job site. However, people can be alerted through our notification system. There's another byproduct, by the way, of geolocationing, and that is the job site has a geofence placed around it. That enables our system to gather additional information very automatically. So job weather data is collected automatically. You simply set the increments of how frequently that should take place, and all of your weather reporting is generated and stored automatically and forever. Our system resides on a Microsoft SQL Server data engine, which is quite powerful, and it allows the storage and backup of that information for as long as you like. One other component that we point out for validation of employee information, if somebody is clocking in. We can prompt for a signature. We can prompt for an employee signature, a foreman signature, even a customer signature for things like change orders and work orders. And then last but not least is we deliver the information that you choose to back to the device. So we have the ability to send a report back to the device that shows budgeted, in this case budgeted versus actual hours. You'll notice we will illustrate in red those items that perhaps are out of threshold. So in fact, we've overrun our hours on this particular line item, so that's showing up in red. We're also showing on this particular report budgeted versus actual production. So we can download that again, the budgeted information directly from Timberline or Master Builder, and that information resides in our system. As we're collecting time and as we're collecting production units from the device through the course of the week, we're updating that information and we're publishing that information back to the people that should have access to it, and doing so on their devices so they don't have to go to the office and log into a computer to find that. And the last illustration, the third screen here, is actually showing the production progress. So we're showing units per hour, in this case in percent completed. And you have the ability to control how those are calculated depending on how you're managing your budgets in your Sage system. So at this point in time, I like to depart from the PowerPoint and actually open up my device and show you what the application looks like, live and in color. And it takes just a moment to replicate my Apple iPad screen on my computer screen. Use a little third-party application to do that. And it works almost every time. Must be my lucky day. There it is. So what you see is a live image of my iPad on your screen. Yes, lots of applications there, but here's the AboutTime application. So I simply touch the button, find my way to the button, and touch it. I'll go back to that for a moment. Sorry. Find my way to the button and tap it, and it opens the application. So my device is actually synchronizing with a sample database. I have employees, I have jobs, I have cost codes and so forth set up in that sample database. And what it's expecting from me now is a PIN code. So for my sample data, we use a 4-digit PIN code. And when I tap, for example, 1111, that represents my sample employee, Daniel Bodie. You'll notice that Daniel has a very, very simple menu or a very simple screen. He really has no choices to make about, for example, job location, cost code, piece of equipment he's using, or anything like that. He simply has the ability at the job site to find the green button and clock in. And the concept behind that was to keep it very simple. If somebody can approach a kiosk with a cash station or an ATM machine and extract money, they should be able to, legally by the way, extract money, they should be able to use our application and clock in and clock out. So as you can tell, and we'll go back to that employee in a little while, as you can tell, that's a very, very simple clock in. So we have the ability to get to those buttons very quickly, remember our PIN code, get to those buttons very quickly, and clock in. Now, I'm going to move up the scale of complexity by clocking in as a few different individuals, and you will see that my user interface changes just a little bit. So as I now tap in as 2222, I'm Sarah Rollins. And again, my menu is almost identical. I can clock in, I can clock out. I have an additional button down below called Forms Express. We'll illustrate that momentarily. However, Forms Express is a client-definable tool that allows you to create form data to be collected from the job site. Things like daily reports, safety reports, safety meeting reports, and so forth. And I have a few different examples that we'll illustrate here momentarily. So I'm going to go ahead, though, and clock in as Sarah. I find my way to the green button, and you'll notice she gets a question now. So unlike Daniel, she's prompted to choose a job location. Sarah, do you want to change locations? Are you working on another job? I'll go ahead and say yes. And what presents itself now is my job list. So all of the jobs that I have set up in my system, all of these, again, have been downloaded from Sage Accounting System. So I simply select the job. And you'll notice Sarah is also presented with a short list of cost codes. So she has, under her control, the ability to clock to just a small handful of cost codes. So when she goes ahead and selects that and accepts, she's clocked in there. So what she did differently than Daniel, she found her way to the green button. However, she was prompted to select a different location, meaning she had moved from one job to another. Now I'm going to go ahead and move up the scale to 9999. When I tap in as 9999, I'm now Tim Quell. In our sample data, Tim has access to a lot of things. He's a superintendent, so he can clock in and clock out. However, when he does so, he'll actually clock in an entire crew of people, and he can select from an at-large list or from the assigned crew members that he has. He also has access to job information, employee information, and so forth. Because of his security level, he might be able to review somebody's emergency contact information if he needs to, and so forth. And you'll see as well, he can enter forms and field notes. But we're going to go ahead and start with clock in. And you'll notice right away the screen is different. So Tim has an assigned list of employees, last employees used. He also has the ability to add employees from an at-large list. If we go ahead and say, well, take your crew and clock them in, he's prompted for clocking in for a different job location. In fact, we'll leave them on the same job, and let's go ahead and pick a cost code from this job, right? So you'll notice I'm illustrating with some very, very different cost codes here, just to illustrate that those are very much job specific. And again, we say okay to that. And the difference is he clocked in 4 individuals as opposed to just clocking himself in. He can go right back to the list of at-large employees, select some, clock them in, choose a different location, and you'll see that the cost code list will follow the project. So they're not necessarily always the same. So in this case, excavation, subgrade excavation, some road work, and so forth. And again, we put these folks together doing some excavation labor and go ahead and accept that. So Tim's clock-in experience is very, very different than either Daniel or Sarah's. I'm going to go ahead and go back to the main screen for a moment, and we'll select one more, maybe 2 more employees. But I'm going to clock in as 4, 4, 4, 4. And this is timesheet entry for Kent Anderson. And we illustrate this as more of a traditional spreadsheet. So Kent Anderson can select his project from the list. He can set his tasks from the list. He can select his employees from the employee list, and again, will pre-fill with last year's. When he does so, he can also select a piece of equipment or pieces of equipment to be used. We do store equipment data, as mentioned before, from the download from your accounting system, and now we have the ability to select those individuals, that piece of equipment, and so forth, and identify how many hours worked. And some of you may be saying, well, that's not clocking in at the beginning of the day and clocking out at the end of the day, and we agree. However, as a workflow, this allows companies to replicate the way they've been doing it. And of course, I can override at the individual level. I can drive in and add more lines of data and so forth, but it's much more like a spreadsheet. And again, this tends to replicate workflows that people already have in place. Do notice that I have the ability to enter production units as well. So I can go ahead and identify how many square yards, how many lineal feet, how many tons of work got completed by that individual or by that crew today. All right. And what I like to do as well, we're about to finish with the device, but I want to illustrate an additional capability of the system, or a couple of additional capabilities of the system. Again, I can move around a little bit. But I've mentioned Forms Express. Forms Express are user-definable data entry screens. So you have the ability to create these for your employees. And I just have different illustrative examples in having worked with a number of companies. So you'll see a change order form, a daily report, an expense report, an injury report, and so forth. And Although we don't have time to open all of them today, I'll just open a couple of them and illustrate how the system prompts for data and how that data then makes its way back to the office automatically. So I'm going to open first the weekly toolbox report, and you'll notice a very, very straightforward form. It prompts for date and time. It pre-fills that form. It prompts for foreman name. I can make this a drop-down list box, or I can simply type it in. What crew was working on this job? And again, I can make that a list, or I can key it in. How many people were in the crew? And you'll notice this is prompting for numeric values now. So I can say, well, we had seven folks on the crew today. Subject matter, ASCOM training. What was the subject specifically? What operations were we working on this week? I can type with my thumbs to get this information in, or I can prompt for with voice recognition. And what we find today is voice recognition works very well. We don't have to train our superintendents to type with their thumbs like teammakers. But you'll notice I'm also prompting down below for photographs. So if we have to positively identify our crew members that attended the meeting, we can take photographs of the individuals that were at the meeting so that we have that validation, much like using, as I mentioned before, a biometric reader to get fingerprints. And you'll notice I can also prompt for a signature. So if I need a superintendent signature on that form, again, that goes with the form. All of that data is stored together and synchronized with my central data system. The last one I want to point out is this thing we call, or that I've designed, that's called an injury report. And again, this illustrates just a few different field types that we hadn't seen before. So remember, you can prompt these questions in the order that you would like, but you'll see, again, date and time. And I can override that, by the way. If I don't get to this until an hour later, I can certainly just open up my clock and say, well, yeah, this took place, back here. I happen to be operating in Central Time, by the way. Don't let that confuse you on your computer. But what is the nature of the injury? What job activity was occurring when the injury took place? Any equipment or tools used when the injury occurred? Were there other crew members present that witnessed it? Take a photograph of the injury. Take a photograph of the location where the injury occurred. And again, let's get the supervisor's signature. So these are just a couple of examples of information that we can prompt for. And again, our clients use our form system to gather, in addition to the time data that our system's already gathered, information about what's happening on the job site right now. All right. So we've gone through quite a bit on the device. What I do want to illustrate is just one last thing. And I'm now going to tap back in. I'm going to clock back in as Daniel Bodie. So Daniel's worked for all of about 10 or 15 minutes. It's been a long, arduous day for him, but we're going to clock him out. And when we do so, you'll notice that even though Daniel doesn't have access to other information, we can prompt him with a question. Daniel, did you get hurt on the job today? Yes or no? If Daniel says yes to that, that can trigger alerts in our system. The company safety and loss prevention lead may be notified of this. Daniel's superintendent or job project manager can be notified about this, and a report can be triggered. Notice there's another question that comes back, and this illustrates that you can prompt for as many questions as you'd like through the course of clock ins and clock outs. I certify that I was given appropriate meal periods and breaks on this workday. We'll go ahead and say yes to that. So feedback questions, again, are very, very user-definable within the system, and we can direct that data, direct that information to the people that should see that. So what I'd like to do is just point out very quickly that although our system's electronic and it's gathering data from the job site in real time, we support and produce time cards and reports and so forth. And you can print these, you can print to screen. These can all be forwarded automatically to the appropriate recipients. The first one we show is a very simple individual time card for a week. Notice we can prompt for employee and supervisor signature. The next one is a crew timesheet for a day. And then the third one we illustrate is a crew timesheet for the week supporting hours by day reporting for certified reports and so forth. And then just a couple of additional reports. I mentioned budgeted versus actual hours. This is a report that illustrates that and shows percent complete based upon that. This is a daily log, as you can see. And again, we're recording employee, what was worked on, regular time worked, overtime worked, and double time. These can be calculated automatically based upon configuration in our system. This is a report. Remember I mentioned weather. We can report the weather automatically, so we gather that based upon the job location. And then any field notes that have been gathered, and you'll notice by time, by date, and so forth. An example using job site photographs to illustrate our work, not our work, and then our guys finishing up. So a very good example of using photographic data to illustrate the type of work we've been working on. And then this particular report speaks to equipment usage. So our system has the ability to store and identify which pieces of equipment are being used, any notes about those, when something needs to be repaired, or oil change, or belt change, or something of that nature. And here is what a GPS geofence discrepancy report looks like. So if somebody's clocked in from 10.76 miles down the road from the job site, that notification is going to occur automatically. That certainly helps to correct employee behaviors. It also is a very, very good safety item. A number of our clients have shared with us that has been very, very useful for them in identifying where their employees have been when they've been called out of location. And then here's a kind of an extreme example of weather reporting every 10 minutes. The system can do this very automatically, so you may want that. All right, that's what I wanted to cover in the formal presentation, and this is the point at which we're happy to address any questions now.
Hey everyone, if you have questions, please type them into the questions box on the screen. Right now, we don't have any.
Perhaps we should open the phone lines.
Since not everyone's on the phone, some people are dialed in through the computer, so it's hard to do that.
Sure. Stronger coffee would be my recommendation, I guess. So Krista, no questions at this point?
No questions.
All right. Perhaps we should let folks finish up their lunch and let us know if they'd like us to follow up.
We have one question. Can you show how employee lists are managed by the office?
Good question. Yes, I can. I think I can. If I can get control of my screen here. So I've opened up the control center portion of the software as well. So when I open it up, it opens with a dashboard. So I have things like weather reports and budget reports and so forth. But within the control center, all of the master file data resides. So for example, here is my employee information. And so what we see is the list of employees. And do please recognize that I only have access to this because I've logged in as an administrator. But we store very recognizable data, name, first name, middle name, last name, employee codes, which division and department this employee reports to, what is their craft code, and so forth, their phone numbers, including this employee PIN number. But this is where the data resides, and this is where we manage what the employees see on their devices and so forth. And this data has been handed to us from Sage. So it's been automatically uploaded. We've not had to enter any of this information. I hope that answers the question.
Okay, the next question, now we have a couple. The next question is, what if an employee is on the job but hasn't been entered to TL yet?
Yes, and that happens. So oftentimes, first of all, we look to the organization and ask, what is your process for a new employee? Whether the employee shows up on the job site, directly from the union hall, or they've been through the office. Most of our clients have some form gathering process, whether on the job site or in the office, that data has to be entered. We do not give the ability to add employee data at the job location. It gets entered either in AboutTime or in Sage and then handed to the device. And what typically happens is the foreman will then come back and correct the time for the first day and say, yes, in fact, he started at 7 o'clock. But that's all about your process as an organization.
Okay, the next question is regarding forms expressed upon completion of a form in the field. How does the form get to the office, and how is it accessed at the office?
Great question. So on the device, this is our synchronization button. So we can push it through the course of the day. So somebody enters the form data, hits the presses the synchronization button. That data, much like the time data, is transported back to the control center. We can also set that, if you choose to take place automatically. So as opposed to your people pressing the synchronization button, the device can be set to do that automatically every 20 minutes or 2 hours, for example. So we can automate that process. And then the data, it goes back to the control center, and it's stored much like our employee data with everything else. And we do have the ability to direct that information to be handed over to other systems. That data is exportable. So for example, if we want to store those forms in a different database, a document management database, or we want to hand it to a Sage product, we can direct that information.
Okay, the next question is, how do you differentiate between scale wages versus non-scale wages on a job, task specific?
Yes, good question. So we have the ability to set up classifications of employees and jobs and unions and so forth. And effectively what we're trying to do with that is mimic the type of setup that's available in a tool like the Sage 300 product or the Sage 100 product, which allows for jobs to host whether it's a prevailing wage or a particular union local or particular union classification. So what we found is we have to mimic that so that as we're handing the time over, we're capturing the appropriate classifications so that wages are selected. And typically the wages are actually stored and picked up on the accounting side, so picked up from the accounting system. We can store the wages in our system. We actually can set that up. Most of our clients choose to have that stored and selected on, within the payroll system. What's important is our system needs the appropriate triggers to find that. We've actually set that up. So we have very comprehensive codes and rates and factors and so forth, again, to mimic what's going on over in the payroll system.
Okay, the next question is, how are worksite directed change orders tracked?
So we have the ability to design forms, and again, through Forms Express, and so I've got a couple of examples here. Neither of them are incredible, I don't think. I've got a work order. Thought I did. Maybe I don't. Through the gathering of data here. So again, we're going to collect such things as a work order number, who the request came from, requested work, and so forth. All of the data that you would choose to collect will take place via the Forms Express piece. And again, remember, we can design these forms to host as many fields in the order that you would choose for those fields to be directed. So we actually gather it there.
Okay. Next question is, presumably there is a workflow process queue in this application. What are some of the parameters?
Yep. In fact, great point. There is. So we have defined workflows and so forth. Basically, any piece of data within our system can be used as a trigger for a workflow. So the real obvious ones tend to be, hey, timesheets are in, it's 5 o'clock. What happens with that data? Perhaps an admin person that's identified as the person responsible receives a notification, hey, your data's here. you can start to work upon it. So you can start to approve time and pass it on to the next handoff. One of the things, by the way, we do have are multiple approval levels, which are definable by you. So that's a pretty typical workflow. Another one is if there's exception data out there. So we have timesheets from, we have 100 employees. We have timesheets from 93 of them, and it's 4:30. There are 7 people that haven't turned their timesheet in yet. Trigger a notification. Notify their supervisor, notify the individuals. Hey guys, we need your time. We process payroll at 8 o'clock in the morning, or something of that nature. So any data within the system can trigger a workflow. Even, for example, weather data. We've got a job condition where wind speed is over 20 miles an hour. We've got to tell our guys to get the lifts down. Any component of the data within our database, and it's pretty expansive, starting with time, but also with all of that form information collected, is fair game for designing a workflow around.
Okay, the next question is, how does the employee report that they changed what cost code they worked on during the day?
So the employee can open that up at the time they start on a new cost code and simply enter the next cost code, much like we were entering with, I believe it was Tim Coella, picking job and then picking cost code. Or conversely, if your organization prefers, after the fact, some of our clients will actually, use the devices to clock people in and clock them out, and the foreman or the superintendent will come back and kind of recreate the day by looking at what they've done. And that really has everything to do with whether you use devices for each employee or whether you use devices just with the superintendents and foreman. Either workflow is okay. We do encourage real-time collection of data, so we encourage, hey, we're finished, setting up forms, and now it's time to get on with rebar. We encourage, triggering the start of the next event by clocking that when it happens. However, many of our clients do fill that in after the fact. And again, it's prompted for on clock in. So it's just while I'm here, go ahead and clock in, and we'll say what location do I have. I guess that one's okay. Guess I'll pick another location since I hit the wrong button, right? But here are my cost codes, and this is a very extensive list of cost codes we can pick from them. And folks, I do apologize for the screen rendering. It's almost magic that we can show this Apple device on the screen. However, I have very little control over the size of the fonting and so forth, so I know that's a little bit difficult to see, but I'm selecting from that list. So cost code selection. Thank you.
Okay, so the next question is, does AboutTime allow for electronic new hire form, an I-9, a W-4 capture in the field so that an image of the completed form can be securely sent from the field to the office?
We do. So we can prompt for, and it is secure data straight to our database. It goes nowhere else. It can then be handed off, of course, to HR and payroll. But through a Forms Express, we can gather that data, taking photographs and so forth. Yes.
Okay, if employees are checking themselves in and out, how does the superintendent get to approve it before it is sent? Example, they use the wrong extra number and or phase.
Yes, so in the system, so you'll notice there's a button here called Records Manager. Records Manager is where a foreman goes in to review and approve time, to allocate time to cost codes, to run spot checks or people where they're supposed to be and so forth. We can even allow the recovery of records. So, for example, it's Thursday. Perhaps I need to correct a time entry that took place on Tuesday. We have the ability to call that information back from the server and make corrections to it. That can happen up to the time that data is handed over to payroll for processing. So it's all through the system, through the device, on the job site. And we'll be happy to get into more details individually with your company if it's appropriate to do so.
Okay, another question is, can data come from AboutTime and go straight into Timberline, or is there usually manual interface needed?
There is usually not manual entry needed at all. So the data can go directly in. Typically, our clients will review it and approve it before that happens, but even that can be automated. And generally what you find with the implementation of our system, through the first couple of weeks, maybe even months of processing, companies will tend to have some stopgaps. Stop, hold the data, look at the data, okay, send it over. And we'll tend to automate that downstream as they become more comfortable with the data handoffs. We do, because we download the employee data, the job cost code data, the job budget data, the equipment data from your Sage system, we're feeding directly back, mimicking the time record. So it's just like any other time record in your Timberline or master builder.
Okay, the last question we have is, does this sync with scheduling?
It can, and in fact, we've got a couple of instances of that. Because of the way that we've built our data handoff tool, we really designed it and constructed it originally to receive and hand data to any system out there. So we use definable field characteristics and so forth to hand data back and forth. Depending on how the schedule is constructed, what the line items look like, the activities and tasks, it's a very, very straightforward thing to receive that data in and send data back. And because we enter production units and percent complete, you have the ability to fulfill some of that schedule data as well.
Okay, another one. If an employee has split time and the too many regular hours are reported, can AboutTime put this information together to put out a warning that too much regular time has been reported? For example, 9 regular hours reported for an 8-hour day.
Yes. Yes, so we can do a couple of things. Number one, we can trigger a notification. We do have the ability to set rules around that. If that 9th hour should automatically become an overtime hour before handoff to accounting, we can do that as well. We can, but as mentioned, we can create notifications around that condition. We can create notifications to a superintendent that, hey, your crew is now going into overtime mode, or your crew has completed 80% of the allocated hours for a cost code. So any of those metrics can become a trigger for a notification.
Okay, another question. How does vacation pay or sick pay get entered?
Yes, we have the ability to record those as well. Under our pay codes and rates, you have the ability to identify those accrual items, and we can capture those on the front end, or you can have a superintendent fill it in either while it's happening or after the fact.
How does it identify straight time hours versus overtime hours?
You set the rules in the system. So whether over 8 in a day or over 40 in a week or over 7 in a day and 35 in a week, you actually set those rules in our system. And those rules can be across the board, or they can become division of the company or even project specific. We also have rules, by the way, around start times and end times. So if people show up on the job site at 6:48, but the first work can not start until 7 o'clock, we actually have those settings in the system as well.
Can it vary by job?
Yes.
Okay, it looks like that's all the questions we have. And if you do have more questions, you can always contact us at any time. Marty, can you put up that screen with all the contact information?
Look at me. Yes, thank you, folks. Good questions all.
Great questions, everyone. We thank you again for attending today's Lunch and Learn session. We will be emailing out this whole presentation to everybody later today. And if you do have any other questions, feel free to contact us at any time. The contact information will be in there as well. Thanks, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks so much, all. Take care.